Just ahead on American Black Journal, an in-depth conversation with actress, author, and civil rights activist Denise Nicholas. Plus, two national experts join me to talk about the current state of the civil rights movement in this country. You don't want to miss this very important program. American Black Journal starts now.
American Black Journal is funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first.
How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
As a leader in innovation, Ford is committed to making people's lives better through social mobility. Through our community programs, Ford is providing opportunities and access that help people succeed and realize their dreams. Sometimes it's as basic as providing a warm meal to a child so they won't be hungry at school and can learn. Sometimes it's about job training for adults to gain economic independence. Whatever your dreams, Ford is committed to helping you achieve them. Ford, driving a brighter future in our community.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. March is Women's History Month, a time to recognize the diverse accomplishments of women. Here in Michigan, the Career Mastered Women's History Awards were given to a group of women who are leaders and role models. The National Living Legend Award was presented to Detroit-born actress, activist, and author Denise Nicholas. She stopped by the WDET studios to talk with me about her legendary career and her participation in the civil rights movement. Let's start in 1964. You were a student at the University of Michigan. You're 19 years old, and you decide that what you want to do is go south to be part of the Free Southern Theater. Give us an idea of what was in your mind at that point, and I want to know what your parents thought about that decision.
Well, it wasn't a good day.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Well, you know, there was a lot of activity on campus at University of Michigan at that time.
Yes.
And a lot of civil rights movement people were coming to campus to talk about what was going on in the South and also to convince other students to join the civil rights movement. And so I was affected by those speakers, as were quite a few other people on campus. Yeah. So I thought, well, how can I do this? How can I involve myself in a way that doesn't scare me half to death, but it also is kind of in the direction of the arts?
Yeah.
And that's when I found the Free Southern Theater. So I joined the Free Southern Theater, which was a part of SNCC, really.
Right.
So I went to Jackson, Mississippi. I was there for 2 years. The theater moved to New Orleans eventually. And we toured all over Mississippi and some places in Louisiana. It was an incredible, incredible 2 years that I wouldn't change for anything, including the bomb that exploded on the stage in Macomb.
I was going to say, I mean, this was, you say that you were looking for a way to participate in this and maybe be safe, but that there was no guarantee of that if you were doing anything.
There was no safety anywhere in Mississippi at that time. There really wasn't. I think our experiences were so riveting and so profound that you carried the fear with you and you just dealt with it on a daily basis. For one night in Ruleville, Mississippi, I stayed in Fannie Lou Hamer's home when the theater toured to Ruleville, and we had to sleep on the floor because they were the Klan was shooting
into the house.
Into the house. And that happened a lot. That happened a lot. In Holmes County, we got there to perform, and the community center had been burned down. So they were in the process of building a new community center. So we performed in a half-built community center. And it was beautiful. As hard as it was, seeing the awakening and the will of the people to make a change, just like these students now out on the streets demonstrating against all this gun violence. It's the same energy. I'm so heartened by these kids. I'm like, they're on TV and I'm just keep going, don't stop.
Wow. So what did your parents say when you said, hey, I'm going to leave school and I'm going to go be part of this movement in the South, and I don't know what will happen to me? What was their reaction?
My mother was terrified. She didn't talk to me for a couple of years. She talked to me when I got to New York 2 years later. So my dad was more philosophical about it because he was a race man. I mean, he's a Detroit person, and he was a person who was in the race riot in Detroit in the 42 or 43?
43, yeah.
He had stories to tell. So he was afraid for me, but he understood. He absolutely understood.
I'm intrigued by your sort of instant identification with the kids who are protesting now, and it's a great sort of way to talk about the differences between what happened in the 60s, what's happening now, and the similarities. I'm always really interested in hearing people who were around for what happened in the 60s talk about what they see today, not just with kids in gun violence. Black Lives Matter is another, I think, echo of that time. Do you feel sometimes like we're going back to the 60s here in America?
Yes. Actually, I think we're going back to the 30s.
To the 30s? Even further?
I don't think we're going to
right?
the 60s. Yeah, I think we're definitely in a retrograde kind of frame of mind in this country, and it's frightening to me because all the work, or most of the work that's been done to create at least the hope that we could reach a better place seems to be just pilfering away.
Yeah.
And so these kids coming now at this point, especially during this particular administration, that's what gives me hope. And it's not that the other organizations over the last 3 years have not, but the timing is what is so powerful to me. It's the timing. It's the shootings in Parkland and the way they talk about it, the way they speak about it. It reminds me of the Stokely Carmichaels and the other leaders of the civil rights movement who spoke so brilliantly about what was going on in the South and what we had to gain and what we had to lose if we kept sitting down and not standing up. Yeah. So these kids are standing up, and they're doing it with so much surety, so much strength. It's like, where did you come from? Who taught you this?
Right.
I mean, these are high school kids. And remember, most of the civil rights movement kids were college kids.
Right.
These are
they
high school
older.
kids.
Right. Yeah.
And they're talking like they're like university kids. I'm listening to these kids. I go,
Where'd you get that, right?
Who are your teachers? Who are your parents? Yeah. They're just they're beautiful. They are beautiful.
Yeah. Denise, I'm going to talk about your later career after going south and then to New York, becoming an actress. You decided at some point that you wanted to be an author.
Yes.
So you walked away and wrote a book.
Wasn't quite that simple, but
right?
yeah, that's
make
the
it
end
sound
result.
like whatever.
Right.
Just go write a book.
Not quite.
Yeah. I mean, I read about the process that you went through to write your first book, and it's really remarkable. I mean, it's remarkable in the sense that I think it portrays, again, the struggle to do something that's art, but also extremely socially relevant. And the story you tell is very much sort of a reflection of the things that you had experienced up to that point.
I think from my experiences at University of Michigan, and particularly my experiences in the South, it created for me an eternal context. And the context for me as a Black woman in America is always going to be based in struggle because we're so far from the finish line. So I don't think I could comfortably write without including that context because it shapes everything that I see and feel. I never let it go. I never let Mississippi go, really. I can't, because it's like a branding. And I knew pretty early on that experience would probably shape something about me for the rest of my life. That's how powerful it was.
That's very powerful imagery as well, that it's like a branding.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and you continue to write. You have a new play.
Yes, this is my last civil rights movement.
Your last.
People are saying, will you get off the civil rights movement, Denise? Will you move on?
Well,
and I'm saying, move on to what?
I was going to say, it's more relevant now, it seems, given what's going on. I mean, these are not old stories.
No.
They're new again.
No, in fact, there are some people who are optioning Freshwater Road, my novel, for film, who say now to them the book is more relevant today than when it was first published in 2005 and 6.
Wow.
So that's great. But the play is called Letters from Freedom Summer. Ricardo Kahn is the lead person on that project, and he brought me in after reading Freshwater Road. He wanted to adapt it to the stage. I said, no, let's do something fresh. So let's start from scratch and do a new piece, which we have done. And it opens at University of Missouri, Kansas City, the first week of May.
You know, when I was just over the last couple of days, I was thinking about these bombings that are happening in
Texas.
In Texas, right? People just going out finding packages on their front stairs, and it blowing up. That does remind me, and I was not alive for the 60s, but it does remind me of the things I've read about that time, the volatility of that time. And I mean, I absolutely hear what you're saying going back further, but the 60s seem to be revisiting us in some of the awfulness, I guess.
Yes, I think so. I think it's unleashed. I think the demons have been unleashed probably mostly by the current administration. I don't want to give it all there, but certainly there's a responsibility to bear. For example, I, as a fairly liberated woman, feel a certain nervousness about going into certain situations that I never felt nervous about previous to last year. And it's because I don't want to be confronted by the insanity that I see rising up in this country. Because I'm not a fighter. I can't beat somebody up, and I don't want to be beaten up, and I don't want to be spoken to in a way that's dismissive and angry and negative. So, and I know if I'm feeling that, other people are feeling it as well.
You can see my entire interview with Denise Nicholas at AmericanBlackJournal.org. Coming up next, a frank conversation on the struggle for civil rights. But first, we're taking a look back at some of the guests on this program over the last 50 years. Here's a 1995 Detroit Black Journal interview with Reverend Jesse Jackson about the Million Man March in Washington, D.C.
What you saw that day was a million black men saying, we are paying over the way we are treated. White man shoots and kills his pregnant wife in Boston, says a black man did it. The police go rushing and looking for black kids in Roxbury. White woman, an estranged, confused lover in South Carolina, drives her 2 babies into the river and kills them. She creates an imaginary black man who did it. In Chicago, a white police shoots a homeless black man at point blank range, blows his brains out. State's attorney will not even charge him with homicide. Mark Furman in the O.J. case, with all of the racism that he represented, the attack is on the jury because it was majority black, not on the white man who perjured himself before the whole world. And so there's a sense of that pain, and we're saying, let's have some plan for fairness and for equality.
Well, when you, who lead a coalition of people of diverse ethnic backgrounds, undertake to redress some of these issues through programs and initiatives, the question must inevitably be asked, if we are to form alliances and become powerful enough to actually do something about these situations, can the job be done by forming alliances with people in other diverse groups, or should we be focused more on what is concerning blacks?
It must be formed with other groups. Blacks need not bear this cross alone.
So we approach the 50th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination next month. We want to take a closer look at the civil rights movement today. Where do we stand in the fight for racial equality and economic justice? And where are we headed? My next guests are national civil rights experts at the forefront of this important conversation. I'd like to welcome Terry Lee Freeman, president of the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, and Rashad Robinson, executive director of the online racial justice organization known as Color of Change. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's start with that prime question. Where are we 50 years after Dr. King was assassinated? Better off, worse off, headed in the right direction, or not?
So I guess I will say that there has been some progress made, but it has not been significant enough. I mean, clearly the legal changes that occurred in the 60s were critical to our progress. But when you look at data around economic factors and where we are now as compared to where we were 50 years ago, in some instances it's worse.
Yeah.
And so in answering the question, where do we go from here, I think the answer has to be forward, we hope.
Yeah.
And it will require us doing it, I think, in a bit of a different way, which I think is why Rashad's work is so critically important as we move forward over the next 50 years.
Those are the next 50 years, right. This is an interesting time to be having this conversation. Given what's going on around the country, I think two things stand out. One is the student movement that seems to be congealing around the question of gun policy in the United States. And then this really strange series of bombings that has been happening in Texas. It reminds of the 60s. It reminds of a more volatile time in our history. And I think the question is, why are we back in that space, right? But then also, how do we navigate it differently so that we're not here again in 50 years?
Yes, I think it really gets us down to these questions of power, right? Not mistaking presence or visibility or awareness for power, but recognizing that power is the ability to change the rules. And I think so much of what we've seen, and especially since the 80s, with the rollbacks of rights and opportunities from 1980 being the height of school integration in this country, we've seen the black and white wealth gap sort of continue to expand since the 80s. And that's all been about a set of rules. Even while we've seen corporate America diversify, we've seen a black president, we've seen Hollywood celebrities, at the macro level, the rules that were put in place largely by big conservative forces supported by major corporations have put communities in harm's way at a macro level. And so what we actually have to do is build the type of powerful campaigns that don't mistake the black faces in high places, which is good, for the actual long-term progress that happens across the community.
Yeah. So talk about how Color of Change is engaging in that work.
So every single day we're hit with all sorts of information from the radio, the television, the internet. And oftentimes, if we don't give someone something to do in that moment, they go back to doing what they were doing before.
Right.
And so what we try to do is pair digital technology with the ability to take clear action. So if you're outraged about something, not just sharing an article, but taking a clear action.
What can I go do?
What can I go do? And was really founded out of that moment in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, where black folks were on their roofs begging for the government to do something and were left to die. And Katrina was about a lot of things: geographic segregation, generational poverty, the impacts of climate and criminal justice, and so many other things. But at the heart of it, no one was nervous about disappointing black people.
Right.
The
No,
government,
they weren't.
media,
Right.
corporations, they were just not nervous. And so that's a question, once again, about power. And so whether it was the campaign that forced Bill O'Reilly or Pat Buchanan or Glenn Beck off the air by going directly after advertisers, mobilizing our members, or forcing corporations to divest from the organization behind voter ID laws and stand your ground laws, or the work we're doing right now to elect reform-minded district attorneys around the country, the most powerful actors in the criminal justice space, to not just be present on the criminal justice moment that we're in, but actually put decision makers in office that are accountable to our community.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it's important to recognize that, if we take a historical look at this, one of the most successful episodes of the civil rights movement was Montgomery and the bus boycott. So when people are asked to do something, they do
They'll
it,
go do
and
it,
there is
right?
an impact that we feel. And ultimately, we know what's going to be important is you got to make people feel this in their pockets.
Yeah, right.
That turns
That's what
heads.
matters
That's
in
what
America,
changes
at least,
things.
right?
Yes.
I'm curious. The museum is in Memphis. Probably not terribly far from the Lorraine Motel.
It's actually at the Lorraine
It's at the
Motel.
Lorraine,
Right.
talk about what this moment sort of reminds
Sure.
for you guys.
Well, we don't need to really rehash what happened on April 4th, 1968. Everybody knows what happened on April 4th, 1968. But what we do need to be reminded of is why King was in Memphis.
Right.
And King was in Memphis because of
sanitation
sanitation
worker
workers.
strike, yeah.
And the fact that 2 gentlemen had been killed because they didn't have a place to go in for shelter, so they took shelter in the garbage truck and they were crushed to death.
Right.
He was there to support them in their fight for humane treatment, more equitable pay, benefits, and it's interesting because we still have 2 of the former sanitation strikers that are working at the sanitation department. One is still on a truck.
Yeah.
So that tells you something about the amount
Right.
of progress
What's happened.
that has taken place over 50 years. So it's really important for us to push forward in this year, 2018, that King's message of economic equity should not be lost. And
Right.
it's a message that people don't talk about that King had.
And that's a different message, right? I mean, it's a tougher message to sort of get your arms around.
And it's not the Disneyfied message
Right.
that we
That's
oftentimes
right.
hear.
That's right.
Right now at the Supreme Court, there is a case, right, that will basically undo the ability for people to collectively organize and
right.
build unions. The
Right.
Janus case of the Supreme Court right now. And we have that case at the same time while major corporations who are using Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech in their
to sell
commercials
trucks.
to sell trucks while fighting their unions.
Yeah.
To the extent that this gets back to us sort of paying attention to the right set of indicators and building the right type of power, forcing not just our marches at the government, at Donald Trump, but also holding all the other entities accountable that have a deep role in how we get to live every single day.
Yeah, community is not built by government alone.
No,
right?
no.
There
It's built by
is
us.
the private sector and there is the independent sector.
Yes.
And it's important that we, frankly, ask each one of these sectors, so what have you done for us lately?
Right,
And how are we going to make it to that next point?
I mean, the question around like images that come into our homes that connect the unwritten rules of our culture. And you think about the fact that as much as people talk about how liberal Hollywood is, America had a black president before we had a black superhero.
Well,
and that is once again a question about the rules and about who makes the decisions and how we need to be challenging at all the sectors in our society if we're going to make the type of change we need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, important times and important work still to be done on all of these fronts. Thank you both for all the work that you do, and thank you for being here on American Black Journal. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org, and you can always connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time.
As American Black Journal looks ahead at the next 50 years, we want to hear from you, the viewers. Tell us what you think of this program and what you'd like to see on future episodes. Visit AmericanBlackJournal.org to take a quick survey and share your opinion. Thank you.
American Black Journal is funded by The W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first.
How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
As a leader in innovation, Ford is committed to making people's lives better through social mobility. Through our community programs, Ford is providing opportunities and access that help people succeed and realize their dreams. Sometimes it's as basic as providing a warm meal to a child so they won't be hungry at school and can learn. Sometimes it's about job training for adults to gain economic independence. Whatever your dreams, Ford is committed to helping you achieve them. Ford, driving a brighter future in our community.